Hello, good evening, and welcome, everyone. I'm so proud to see you guys. Um, I have the opportunity to introduce one speaker. She almost introduced herself, but no need to. Um, I take the pleasure of doing so. It's my pleasure and great honor to introduce to you Reverend Annie Allen. She is a pastor of Brook Church in Hillburn, New York, and the founder and CEO of the Academy of Social Action in Frampton Lakes, New Jersey. The Academy for Social Action works to equip students and activists in nonviolent resistance and organization skills. Reverend Annie was born in the Bronx and went to Tarf High School. She studied labor relations at Empire State College and graduated from Drew Theology Seminary. She has long been active in the struggle for civil women's LBGT and environmental and racial justice. Without further ado, I take it as my pleasure and honor. Put your hands together for Reverend Annie Allen. You're welcome.
Good evening, everybody. Friends and comrades, it's always an honor and a privilege for me to stand here and to lend my small voice to the struggle for fair and just society. And Mike and Jarvis and the organizing committee, I thank you for once again every year. This particular event gets better and better and better, and I'm really honored to be able to participate. Lisa, where'd she go? Oh, right there. Lisa, thank you so much for the input and letting us know what's happening. And Naisha, thank you. And the speakers were just terrific in bringing us these on-the-ground examples of what's happening in the struggle and what working people are doing. I'll tell you just a little bit about who I am. You know, I joined the party as a college student when I attended the Harry Van Arsdale School of Labor Studies. That was back in 1978, and I was just 19 years old. Gus Hall was here in the building at that time, and I had the privilege of occasionally sitting in the office of Henry Winston. And this is where I learned what was true and what was right. Since then, I've had a 25-year career in higher education. I worked for 2 state legislators. I organized and worked for dozens of political campaigns. I started grassroots organizations. I served on countless boards and committees. I became an ordained minister. I labored in the faith community. I got married. I got divorced. I raised children. And I flunked retirement. But wherever I've gone and whatever I've traveled, no matter what I've been a part of, no matter how many successes and failures over the years, I have never lost my vision for a socialist America. And the Communist Party, for me, remains the purest, steadiest organization of men and women I have ever been a part of. The Communist Party USA is the only organization I know of that has consistently championed the struggles for democracy, for labor rights, for women's equality, for racial justice, for the protection of our precious environment, and the end to militarism and the cause of peace. No other organization that I know has consistently stood shoulder to shoulder with the left out and the pushed out and the poor and the oppressed in our society. And all of the hard-working, working-class men and women and people in our society who struggle on a day-to-day basis to put bread on the table. The Communist Party has done that for 100 years. Capitalism cannot, it will not, and it cannot guarantee peace or security for the working class in our country. In fact, capitalism has proven that if you are not born into privilege, your chances of success are quite limited. And I'm not just talking about women of color and immigrants and people of color. Working class people, hard working class people in our country are in grave peril today. And only a socialist America can afford every working person a decent and secure job and a living wage. Only socialism can remove corporate greed and corporate control of our government and our institutions. Only socialism can afford my grandbabies a democratic society where their rights are protected and their environment is clean. This is our annual Black History Month event. I wish I could stand here and just celebrate the successes of our African American sisters and brothers. I would love to recount our freedom from slavery, to discuss the successful struggle against Jim Crow segregation, the victories won through the Civil Rights Movement, the election of our first African American president of the United States. But again, these are urgent times. The presidency of Donald J. Trump and the collaboration of the Republican Party has placed our entire democracy in peril. In 3 short years, the Trump presidency has systematically dismantled many hard-won gains in labor rights, environmental protections, public education, immigration for refugees, people of color, and our Muslim brothers and sisters. In these 3 short years, white nationalism has become normalized. America First policies and rhetoric has placed the United States in a precarious position on the world stage, making the U.S. an unreliable and unpredictable ally in the world. Racist and sexist attacks by our president are supported and justified by Republican politicians and right-wing pundits, and too often by other citizens as well. Scandals regarding Russia and North Korea and the Ukraine have somehow become normal. Rudeness, bullying, arrogance has become the primary characteristic of our leaders and far too many citizens. I live in New Jersey, so I may have an overabundance of rudeness and crudeness, but I don't believe that we're just the only state where people have taken on a level of hostility that I have not witnessed in my 60 years. In 3 short years, facts don't matter. Our faith in institutions, the courts, federal agencies, even the military has been discredited. And with Russia interference, voter suppression, and abuse of executive powers, our very democracy is in question. We are in a time of terrible culture wars. Issues that in the past had been vigorously debated in a democratic fashion, such as gun control and gun violence, immigration, law and order, civil rights, global warming, environmental protection, the electoral process itself have become polarized issues, splitting families and friendships and communities. Unity is an elusive thing right now in our country. But facts do matter. I wanted to just touch on a few facts. Number 1, the economy. It depends on whose economy we're talking about. All economic indicators show a strong economy. If you're on Wall Street, it's great. If you have a large 401k, if you have investments or trust funds, it's great. If you have a corporation or a big business, it's great. If you make over $1 million a year, it's greater than great. Corporate earnings are up. What I learned just recently is over half of those profits come from outside of the U.S. Part of the United States' upward economic measures are due to a stronger world economy, namely Asia and Asia and Europe. So the world economy is stronger. Our economy is part of that, and our economy is stronger. But again, it depends on whose economy we're talking about. Unemployment rates are lower, but many Americans are working 2 jobs. So does that mean if I have 2 jobs, I get counted twice? Does that somehow lower the unemployment rate? Yeah, it does. Minority unemployment still remains in the double digits. I had someone once say that African Americans are doing better now economically than they ever did in history. And we still have double unemployment, double-digit unemployment. And good working class jobs are still few and far between. So if you're an average American living paycheck to paycheck, the economy may not be so great. I'm not going to debate whether the current economy is a result of the upward trends from 8 years of the Obama White House, or if we should credit the current last 3 years to the current administration. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because the economy is good depending on how much you actually earn and what zip code you live in. The tax cuts of 2018 and 2019 of $1.5 trillion to corporations and the 1% of millionaires and billionaires was a one-time windfall for the rich, and it has not been reinvested back into jobs, into providing jobs as we would have to believe. Rather, billions of tax dollars have gone directly into the coffers of the mega rich, adding trillions of dollars to the deficit, which our grandchildren will inherit. The Trump trade war, tariffs on Chinese goods, has bankrupted the American soybean farm industry. Soybean farmers in Virginia are shutting down. Farmers in the Trump country in the Midwest are getting crushed. Trashing of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, and the ending of the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement, the American First policy has hurt both traders and consumers. And we feel it the most as consumers. And even though our economy continues to get stronger as the growing world economy gets stronger, and we continue to build on that upward cycle from the previous 8 years, there remains vast pockets of inequality. Wages not meeting the cost of living. Over 50% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Individuals and households must have multiple jobs. Unemployment still double digits in minority communities. I looked for a place to live. I live in in northern New Jersey in Bergen County. And I'm on a retirement income. I could not find a place within 60 miles of where my grandchildren live. People have 2 and 3 and 4 families living in one house. And that's in the suburbs where I live. People have 3 and 4 people living in one house just to be able to make ends meet. That doesn't feel like a strong economy to me. When the president ran for office, he promised great infrastructure developments. I was thinking about the Roosevelt New Deal. I thought we were going to get all new bridges and roads, and it never happened. The investment in our infrastructure was supposed to bring hundreds of thousands of good construction jobs and other jobs. And recent proposals, there have been some recent proposals for infrastructure, but do you know that they have been exempted from environmental review? So if some of the building that occurs produces some jobs, it will be at the cost of the environment with little insight into where things are built and how the environmental impact is on that. You know, another thing is that we were promised public transportation. There's been no or very little investment in public transportation. And why? Because the fossil fuel industry has lobbied our legislatures to the extent where they want to keep us dependent on cars and trucks. They want the country dependent on cars and trucks for transportation, for moving goods and services, so we don't invest in light rail, we don't invest in heavy rail, we don't invest in clean energy, because they want the fossil fuel industry has a stranglehold on our federal government at the moment. I want to say a few words about the environment. We're in an environment where our leadership has disregarded science in favor of potential profit of developing of the fossil fuel industries. We have disregarded science and enlarging the coal industry. We have killed natural habitats across the country. The EPA's policies to exempt infrastructure projects from EPA review, as I just mentioned. And they say it's under the guise of bureaucratic reform they want to do away with bureaucratic overburdened, and they use the term slashing job killing regulations. Specifically in 2017, President Trump and his Republican collaborators in the Senate had appointed coal lobbyist Scott Pruitt to head the EPA. When Scott was resigned under scandal for corruption and misuse of public funds, they appointed another coal industry lobbyist, Andrew Wheeler. And under the policies of the EPA, they have, I think, 8 points. They have buried the U.S. climate report that was given by seven federal agencies. They dismantled and endangered the Endangered Species Act. They've sold off Americans' public lands, 19 million acres in the Arctic and 9 million acres in the West for oil drilling. They've cut environmental reviews by half. They replaced the Clean Water Plan by eliminating incentives to states and investing in renewable energy in favor of coal. They replaced a tax on imported solar panels. The solar industry is growing, but most panels are developed or created overseas. Now the tariffs are so high, so people can't. So even if you have a company and you want to build solar farms or put solar panels on buildings or whatever, the tariffs are so high that you can't get the goods. In essence, you know, severely handicapping any movement towards the use of solar energy. They've lowered efficiency standards for car emissions. They actually sued California because they refused to lower car emissions. And this was insane because the automobile industry was already on its way to making cleaner cars. But this administration saw fit to roll it back anyway, just because. Not only does it hurt the environment, but it decreases fuel economy, and it's estimated that that the average motorist will spend an additional $250 in gas by lowering those emission standards. I think that's sort of interesting. They've lifted the greenhouse gas limits on power plants, and they're destroying natural habitats, Native American lands, to build their border fences in the southwest. Internationally, we have stopped being a world leader and stopped cooperating with other agencies in solving global warming. by withdrawing from the Paris Accords and our president's diverting blame on the international front. I want to say a few words about public education. I believe we are in an ideological war to profitize education. Democracy depends on an educated citizenry. And the resulting of privatizing, that's taking public funds away from public schools and colleges, will be that education will revert back into the hands of the elite, those who can afford an education. And then when we have representatives that want to propose free education for all, they're called socialists. Well, I'm here to say that that's a pretty good social measure. In 3 short years, the education landscape has changed dramatically. Since the West Virginia teachers walked out of their classrooms in 2018, teachers in more than half a dozen other states had joined them, including many of the deep red states where Trump has his biggest support. They have followed suit. Some reporters have called this the most sustained America protest movement in decades. Go teachers. But under Betsy DeVos, this year's budget proposals would eliminate, this year, 29 federally funded educational programs, and includes cuts totaling $3.5 billion. That's 12% decrease from the department's previous year's budget. So for 3 solid years, the funding to the Department of Education has systematically decreased over the last 3 years. So we can assume that if this trend continues, public education is at grave peril. And it's a foundational principle of the United States of America that every child, not just the rich, not just the privileged, not just landowners, but kids in the rural areas, kids in inner cities, kids who are of working class parents, all deserve a decent education to keep up into the 21st century economy. Moreover, the administration has begun to propose to eliminate $2.1 billion in Title II Part A funding. This program most directly supports teacher salaries and professional development. It's a direct attack on American teachers to cut nearly 35,000 teacher salaries that fall under Title II. I want to say a few words about immigration. You know, not only did we have a Muslim ban 3 years ago, it's been increased this year to add several other countries. The attack on sanctuary cities, the attack on DACA, and I come out of higher education, and my heart breaks when there's a 20-year-old, I don't care who they are, that can't get an education or who's afraid to even show up for school under DACA, or afraid that their scholarship money is going to disappear. The ever-growing ICE raids throughout the country, and I live in New Jersey. We have a group called Faith New Jersey. It's clergy people from around the state that are working on immigration. And we consider this domestic terrorism against the poor and Latino communities, whether they are legal or not. There is a narrative that immigrants are violent criminals. There's a narrative that this war on immigration is about illegal immigration. That is false. Immigration policies have put a means test on people applying for green cards. This is discouraging thousands of people who are trying to navigate the system legally by applying for a green card. Yet the means test If you've ever received food stamps or if you've ever received any sort of public assistance in your development here in the United States, you may be in jeopardy of not getting your green card and then exposed and deported. So the war on immigration is not about what's legal and what's illegal, who broke the law and who didn't break the law. The refusal to accept refugees is in violation of international law. Every country on the planet accepts people who are refugees, who are fleeing oppression or violence or extreme poverty. And we have turned our backs and closed our borders. So the current policies on immigration, it's not about law and order. It's not about who's legal and who's illegal. Nor is it to protect American jobs, which we would be led to believe. It's a culture war to make America white again. It's a culture war that has nothing to do with illegal or illegal. It is downright racist. And I believe the Communist Party rejects racism in any form. I'm only going to say about 2 sentences regarding health care. We all agree on health care for all. Every Democratic candidate has one form or another, and I'm not going to even try to figure out who's got the best plan or whatever, though I have my personal preference. But everybody agrees we need decent, affordable, and accessible health care for every U.S. citizen. I'll leave it at that. My 6th point is kind of a personal point as a person of faith and a clergy person. I believe that our current president is unfit on moral reasons. Besides the overt racism, which speaks fear and backlash from white nationalists in our country, their assumption that this is a white country and that the voices of people of color, such as our beautiful women of color in Congress, and right down to our NFL players, that somehow those voices are illegitimate. Hate groups are on the rise exponentially in our country. There have been financial scandals of so many cronies, the refusal to release his tax returns. There's been no divestment in his properties, which is still a direct violation of the emoluments clause. His wife and daughter and son-in-law continue to make billions in business profits while serving in the White House on public tax dollars. And many other offenses, in my view, make him unfit. So where do we go from here? We continue to build the road to socialism. Polls show that voters under 45 years old see socialism as a viable option to a capitalist economy where the rich get richer and the rest of us live paycheck to paycheck. A capitalist economy that rapes the environment, a capitalist economy where large mega corporations eat small businesses and local industry for lunch, a capitalist economy where big oil, big pharma, multinational corporations buy and sell our duly elected representatives at every level of government, a capitalist society with the highest rates of incarceration in the industrialized world, a capitalist society where consumerism is placed above humanism, and capitalist society where we measure ourselves by the height that one could achieve, as opposed and ignore all of those on the floor. We already have many socialist measures that we take for granted that need to be preserved and expanded. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, public education, fire, police, trash pickup, roads and infrastructure, civil regulations, civil rights. Most Democrats want to reform capitalism. Some of us believe we should abolish capitalism. So the path to moving JDT from office, then removing his Republican collaborators, lies in doing what the Communist Party has always done best: building the broadest, most inclusive unity among our multi-ethnic, male-female, multi-generational working class, supporting and building and coalescing with the American labor movement, racially and nationally oppressed people, women, and youth. We must organize alongside the LGBT community, professionals, and intellectuals. I never thought I would live in an environment where being an intellectual was suddenly a bad thing. Seniors and the disabled. Our strongest allies lie within existing coalitions for peace and the environmental protection and environmental justice. Healthcare advocates, education advocates, housing advocates, faith groups, and other progressive movements. The right-wing agenda that JDT represents is only successful because of fear and ignorance. Fear of others, fear of difference, fear of change, and fear of economic insecurity. Ignorance of others, ignorance of difference, ignorance about the nature of change, ignorance about an economic system that is designed to suppress wages, limit job opportunities, and scapegoats the poor and the marginalized, while deflecting the real cause of economic insecurity, which is the capitalist class of mega rich who are getting richer and richer. America is much better than that. We, the people, are much better than that. Everyday grassroots working people are much stronger than fear or ignorance. Together, we can continue to build the road towards capitalism. Lastly, I'd like to say that I came into the party as a 19-year-old college student. I am now a grandmother of 4 grandbabies. I no longer struggle for myself. I continue to struggle for them, so that my grandbabies and all their little friends can enter a society with opportunities for good education, for opportunities for a good job, for a safe place to live, while their skin tone or their curly hair or their gender or their sexual orientation is not a burden to overcome, but valued and celebrated. Where the air they breathe and the water they drink is not polluted because of overconsumption and corporate greed. I want my grandbabies to grow up in a world that is free from war. So this is a call to resist, because we are not going back. We are not going back. Thank you.
And wonderful. Before we conclude, I have